Hi, this is Esteban Sanchez from Gatarath, and in this video I'm going to provide a quick introduction to function points. I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so let's start by defining what function points are. Function points are basically a unit of measurement. Yes, just like you can use pounds to measure weight, miles to express distance, or Fahrenheit degrees to report temperature. You can use function points to measure and express the size of your software applications. In essence, how big an application is in terms of functional user requirements. Function points are also independent of programming languages and technologies used for development. So it doesn't really matter if the code was written in .NET or Java. It is not relevant if your application runs on Android or iOS. Just like pounds don't really care if you're measuring a cat or an elephant or a truck. Function points are going to be completely independent of technologies, platforms, and programming languages used for development. Function points are also an international standard for software functional size since 2009. Function points were first introduced in the mid-70s. Back then, a gentleman by the name of Alan Albrecht was presented with the task of finding new ways to measure application development productivity. He came up with the first version of function points. A bit later, in 1979, Mr. Albrecht published his paper titled Measuring Application Development Productivity at a software conference in California, and this was the first exposure of function points to the international software community. In 1984, the International Function Points Users Group was born. IFPUC is a non-for-profit organization dedicated to maintain the function points standards, and it also provides training and certification for the function points community. Finally, in 2009, IFPUC function points became an international standard for software functional size. Okay, so now that we understand what function points are, let's talk about what we are measuring with function points. Any type of software development project includes three types of requirements. First of all, we have project requirements and constraints. These are things that deal with project milestones and budgets, project management standards, dependencies with other projects, resources, and staffing. Non-functional requirements such as quality constraints, reliability requirements, usability, performance of the system, and security. And finally, we have the functional user requirements. These are requirements that describe what the application should do in terms of data transfer and data transformation, storage, data processing, retrieval and presentation of data. It is precisely with this third category that function points deal with. So function points do not measure non-functional requirements nor project requirements and constraints. These are out of the scope. Function points focus on measuring the size of the functional user requirements. Let's take a look at some examples of functional user requirements. Input forms. For example, adding a new contact in your phone is an example of a functional user requirement. Any type of report generated by an application. Business transactions, such as those found in data warehouse and business intelligence systems. Processing of data from sensors, like we find in aircrafts and cars. And any type of processing that involves mathematical and logical operations. These are all examples of functional user requirements that can be measured with function points. The next piece of the puzzle is understanding the components of function points. We start with the application we want to count. Any type of application, whether it is embedded, PC, mainframe, or cloud application, can be subject to function point analysis. The application boundary is an imaginary boundary that surrounds the application being counted. It helps to distinguish what data is internal and external to the application, as well as what data comes in and leaves the application. Internal data is the data owned and maintained by the application. This is the data that the application uses to satisfy a certain business objective. External data is data that the application uses as reference only. This data does not belong to the application. You can think of external data as read-only data that the application consults to perform a certain action. Inputs are transactions that bring information into the application, such as screens, forms, or data from external systems. Outputs are transactions that present information to the users or external systems, such as reports or messages. Outputs involve calculations, creation of additional data, or modification to internal data. Queries are transactions that present information to the users or external systems as well, but these do not include any calculations or modifications to internal data. Queries are basically retrieval of data for presentation. Notice that all of these transactions allow the application to interact with external users, which can be persons like you and me, but also systems such as other software applications or external hardware. One small caveat to this is that Function Points uses a slightly different vernacular for all these things. Internal data is actually called internal logical files or ILFs. External data is called external interface files or EIFs. Inputs are called external inputs or EIs. Outputs are called external outputs or EOs. And finally, queries are called external queries or EQs. In summary, these are all the components that are measured under function points. Notice that we look at data at rest, including internal data and external data. And we also look at data in motion, which is basically your external inputs, external outputs, and external queries. And there you go. That was a quick introduction to function points. In summary, function points are basically a unit of measurement, just like pounds, miles, or Fahrenheit degrees. Function points can be used to measure and express the size of the functional user requirements that are satisfied by an application. In addition, we also learned about the different types of elementary processes within function points. I hope you find this video informative. Thank you very much.